A homeless man shivers in the corner of a bustling fast food restaurant, his weathered hands trembling as he counts a collection of coins spread across the scratched plastic table. The coins, gathered from hours of searching streets and parking lots, represent his entire worth, exactly $1.17. The aroma of fresh burgers and fries fills the air, a cruel reminder of his hunger, but he's learned to ignore it. Through the grimy window, the late autumn sun casts long shadows across the busy street, marking another day of survival. At the counter, a little girl clutches her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face as the cashier shakes his head. Their card has been declined again, and the small meal they'd hoped to share remains frustratingly out of reach. The mother's face flushes with embarrassment as she fumbles through her purse, knowing she'll find nothing but receipts and empty promises. Other customers shift uncomfortably, some averting their eyes, others checking their phones, pretending not to notice the unfolding scene. The homeless man watches, his own coin suddenly feeling heavy in his calloused palm. Each penny represents a chance at his next meal, yet something stirs in his chest as he observes the child's distress. Unknown to everyone, a figure in a black leather jacket stands motionless near the entrance, dark sunglasses masking his eyes, but not his interest in the scene before him. The restaurant's fluorescent lights flicker, casting an odd glow over what's about to become an extraordinary moment of human kindness. Nobody notices as the homeless man slowly rises from his corner table, his decision already made. The coins in his hand catch the light, each one telling a story of struggle and survival. What happens next will change not just one life, but an entire community's understanding of dignity, compassion, and the true value of a single dollar. The morning had started like any other for Tom Bennett. He'd woken up beneath the overpass on 4th Street, his makeshift bed of cardboard and an old sleeping bag offering little protection against the bitter November wind. His joints ached from the cold, but he'd learned to push through the discomfort months ago, when life had taken an unexpected turn and landed him on these unforgiving streets. Tom folded his blanket with military precision, a habit from his days serving in the Army. 20 years ago, he'd worn a uniform with pride. Now he wore layers of donated clothes, each piece carefully chosen for warmth rather than appearance. His salt and pepper beard, once neatly trimmed, had grown wild, matching the untamed circumstances of his life. But his eyes remained sharp, observant, carrying a dignity that homelessness hadn't managed to strip away. The regulars at Murphy's coffee shop knew him well. Every morning, he'd sweep their sidewalk in exchange for a cup of hot coffee, his way of maintaining his self-respect. Melania, the owner, always slipped him a day-old muffin too, though they both pretended it was just another part of their business arrangement. Today, he'd spent hours collecting coins from gutters and beneath vending machines, counting each one carefully, planning to treat himself to his first real meal in days. The McDonald's on Carter Street had become his sanctuary of sorts. The staff usually let him sit in the warm corner by the window, as long as he bought something small. He'd learned their schedules, knew which managers were kind, and which would chase him away. Today, Monica was working the counter. She had a soft spot for the local homeless, having experienced tough times herself. Tom had chosen this time carefully, when the lunch rush would be ending but the warmth of the day would still linger in the building. As he settled into his usual corner seat, Tom watched the steady stream of customers flow through the doors. Businessmen in pressed suits, construction workers in dusty boots, mothers with young children, each living their own story, most barely noticing the quiet man in the corner. He arranged his coins on the table, a ritual that gave him comfort. Pennies in one pile, nickels in another, each representing hours of searching, bending, reaching into places others wouldn't touch. The restaurant's rhythm suddenly shifted as a young mother and her daughter entered, their attention visible even from across the room. Tom recognized the look, the careful way the mother checked prices, the hopeful excitement in the child's eyes, unaware of the financial calculations happening in her mother's mind. He'd seen this scene play out before, but today felt different. Maybe it was the way the little girl reminded him of his own daughter, now grown and lost to him through years of mistakes and misunderstandings. Or maybe it was simply time for something to change. Melania Miller clutched her mother's hand tightly as they walked through the McDonald's doors, the warmth inside a welcome relief from the biting cold. At 9 years old, Melania understood more than her mother realized. She noticed how Mom's smile grew tighter each time bills arrived in the mail, how their apartment grew quieter after Dad left 6 months ago, and how her mother's eyes would water when she thought Melania wasn't looking. Today marked 3 weeks since her mother lost her nursing assistant job at the local hospital. Budget cuts, they'd said. 3 weeks of missed rent payments, ignored phone calls, and empty promises about things getting better soon. But Melania still wore her optimism like armor, believing that tomorrow would bring the change they desperately needed. The smell of French fries made Melania's stomach growl audibly. She hadn't mentioned to her mother that she'd skipped lunch at school today, giving her sandwich to her best friend Emma, whose family was going through similar hard times. Their last proper meal had been yesterday morning, plain oatmeal that her mother had stretched to fill both their bowls. Rebecca Miller guided her daughter toward the counter, mental calculations running through her head. The emergency credit card had been declined yesterday at the grocery store, but maybe, just maybe, there would be enough left for one small meal they could share. Melania's eyes wandered over the bright menu boards, settling on the kids' meal with chicken nuggets, her favorite before everything had changed. The cashier, a teenager with braces and a name tag reading Kyle, waited expectantly as Rebecca fumbled with her wallet. Melania watched her mother's trembling fingers slide the credit card through the reader once, twice, 3 times. Each declining beep seemed to echo through the restaurant, drawing unwanted attention from nearby customers. Kyle's expression shifted from boredom to annoyance, then to uncomfortable pity. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the card isn't working," Kyle announced, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Would you like to try another payment method?" Rebecca's face flushed deep red as she searched through her purse, knowing she would find nothing but old receipts and loose change. Melania felt tears welling up in her eyes, not from hunger, but from watching her mother's dignity crumble under the fluorescent lights. A businessman in line behind them sighed heavily, making a show of checking his expensive watch. A woman whispered something to her companion, both shaking their heads in judgment. Melania wanted to disappear, to become invisible like she did at school when classmates talked about their family vacations and new toys. The tears began falling freely now, despite her best efforts to be brave for her mother. We'll come back another time," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. She tugged gently at Melania's hand, ready to retreat from their latest humiliation. But Melania's feet remained planted, her eyes fixed on the illuminated menu board, hunger and hope warring in her small frame. "Please, Mom," she whispered, "I'm so hungry." The words pierced the restaurant's ambient noise, carrying across the space to where Tom sat with his carefully arranged coins, to where a man in a black leather jacket stood silently observing, to where every adult in earshot felt the weight of a child's simple plea. Rebecca knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep about dinner at home, about things getting better, about tomorrow being different. Nobody in the restaurant seemed to know quite what to do. The line had stopped moving, suspended in that uncomfortable moment between compassion and convenience, between helping and hurrying along with their own lives. It was in this frozen moment that Tom looked down at his $1.17 and made a decision that would change everything. Tom stared at his collection of coins, each one representing hours of searching, bending, and hoping. His weathered fingers traced the outline of a penny from 1985, the year his daughter was born. The memory of her childhood flashed through his mind. Birthday parties at McDonald's, sharing French fries, her laughter echoing through similar restaurants before life took its cruel turns. His own story of downfall played, like a worn movie in his thoughts. A successful construction foreman once, he lost everything after an accident left him unable to work. Medical bills piled up, savings drained away, and his pride prevented him from asking for help until it was too late. The divorce came next, then the foreclosure, and finally the streets. Each step down had seemed impossible until it became his reality. The sound of Melania's quiet sobs cut through his memories. Tom watched as Rebecca tried to guide her daughter toward the door, their shadows long and defeated in the afternoon light. He saw in Melania's eyes the same hunger he'd learned to live with, but on her it seemed an unforgivable tragedy. The coins under his fingers suddenly felt both heavy with possibility and meaningless all at once. A memory surfaced, a cold night in Baghdad 15 years ago, when a local man had shared his last piece of bread with Tom's unit after they'd helped his family. The man's words, heavily accented but clear, still echoed. When you have nothing left to give, giving means everything. Tom hadn't understood then, but now, watching Melania and her mother, the wisdom of those words crystallized with perfect clarity. The restaurant's usual sound seemed to fade away as Tom gathered his coins with trembling hands. Each movement felt deliberate, as if he were performing a sacred ritual. $1.17. Not enough for a real meal for himself, but enough to add to whatever change Rebecca might have, enough perhaps to feed a hungry child. His own empty stomach protested, reminding him that this decision meant another day without food, another night of hunger pangs keeping him awake. Tom rose from his seat, his joints creaking in protest. The distance to the counter seemed to stretch endlessly, each step carrying the weight of his decision. He could feel eyes on him, some curious, others wary. The man in the black jacket shifted slightly, his attention focused on the unfolding scene. Tom's army training had taught him to notice such details, to remain aware of his surroundings. But right now his focus remained fixed on the mother and daughter ahead. His footsteps, muffled by worn sneakers, carried him forward. The coins felt warm in his palm, warmed by hours of counting and considering. Tom thought of all the places these coins had been, how many hands they'd passed through, how many stories they carried. Now they would tell one more story, perhaps their most important one yet. As he approached Rebecca and Melania, Tom straightened his shoulders, summoning the dignity that had carried him through countless difficult days. He wasn't just a homeless man in that moment. He was someone who could help, someone who could make a difference, no matter how small. The fluorescent lights caught the silver of his coins, making them shine like precious gems rather than the cast-off pennies and nickels they were. The man in the black jacket, Keanu Reeves, though no one had recognized him yet, leaned forward slightly, his sunglasses masking eyes that had witnessed countless acts of kindness during his years of anonymous generosity. But something about this moment, about this man giving literally everything he had, captured his attention in a way few things had before. He watched as Tom closed the final steps to Rebecca and Melania, the coins clutched carefully in his outstretched hand, about to transform a simple fast food restaurant into a stage for an extraordinary demonstration of human compassion. Keanu Reeves had chosen this particular McDonald's for its quiet corner booth, perfect for reading scripts without drawing attention. Dressed in his signature black jacket and dark sunglasses, he perfected the art of blending into backgrounds, of watching life unfold around him without interruption. But today, the pages of dialogue in his hands had become forgotten as he witnessed a different kind of story playing out before him. He'd noticed Tom hours earlier, watching the homeless man's methodical arrangement of coins with quiet interest. As someone who'd spent decades studying human behavior for his roles, Keanu recognized the dignity in Tom's movements, the military precision that spoke of a past very different from his present circumstances. When Melania and Rebecca entered, Keanu had sensed the shift in the restaurant atmosphere, felt the collective discomfort of customers confronted with someone else's struggles. The scene stirred memories of his own childhood, of times when his mother had stretched every dollar to feed their family, of the shame that came with not having enough. Despite his current success, those memories remained sharp, teaching him that fortune was as fleeting as it was precious. He'd made a practice of anonymous generosity over the years, but something about this moment felt different, more profound. Through his dark lenses, Keanu studied Tom's approach to mother and daughter. The homeless man's hesitation spoke volumes, not from uncertainty, but from the weight of his decision. Keanu noticed how Tom's shoulders squared before stepping forward, how his chin lifted slightly, carrying himself with the bearing of someone about to perform an important duty rather than a man surrendering his last coins. The restaurant's fluorescent lights cast strange shadows, creating an almost theatrical scene. Other customers had fallen silent, their own drama suspended as they watched Tom's slow progress toward Rebecca and Melania. Keanu observed their expressions shifting from initial wariness to dawning understanding as Tom's intentions became clear. The teenage cashier, Kyle, had stopped his performative sighing, now watching with the rest of them as something extraordinary unfolded. Keanu felt his throat tighten as he watched Tom extend his hand, coins catching the light. The moment transcended the simple exchange of money. It was about dignity, about choosing kindness when you had nothing else to give. In all his years of philanthropy, Keanu had never witnessed such a pure expression of generosity. Here was a man who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to help others even when you barely had enough for yourself. The actor's hand moved to his wallet, not out of obligation, but from a deep recognition that he was witnessing something that demanded response. This wasn't about charity or publicity. It was about honoring the profound humanity in Tom's gesture. Keanu had long believed that real heroes weren't found in his action movies, but in these quiet moments of human connection, in choices made when no one was supposed to be watching. As Tom prepared to hand over his coins, Keanu removed his sunglasses, folding them carefully into his pocket. The time for observing was over. Sometimes life presented moments that called for more than watching, moments that demanded participation in the story unfolding before you. This was one of those moments, and Keanu knew exactly what needed to happen next. Tom's hand, still extended with his collection of coins, froze mid-motion as a calm voice cut through the restaurant's tense atmosphere. "Wait!" The single word carried an authority that made everyone turn. Keanu Reeves stepped forward, his presence both commanding and gentle as he moved toward the small group at the counter. The restaurant fell completely silent, the usual clatter of trays and murmur of conversations suspended in this extraordinary moment. Rebecca pulled Melania closer instinctively, uncertain of this new development. Tom slowly lowered his hand, the coin still clutched tightly, as Keanu approached. The actor's face held no judgment, only a deep understanding that seemed to bridge the vast differences in their circumstances. He stopped beside Tom, placing a gentle hand on the older man's shoulder. "Sir," Keanu addressed Tom directly, his voice low and respectful, "I've been watching you count those coins for the past hour. That's everything you have, isn't it?" Tom nodded slowly, his weathered face showing no shame, only quiet dignity. Keanu turned to Rebecca and Melania, noting the tear tracks on the little girl's cheeks, the way her mother's hand trembled as she held her daughter close. The restaurant's manager had emerged from the back office, recognizing the famous actor but uncertain how to handle this unusual situation. Keanu paid him no attention, focused entirely on the scene before him. "What's your name?" he asked the little girl softly. Melania looked up at him, her eyes wide with recognition, despite her hunger and distress. "Melania," she whispered, "and this is my mom." Keanu knelt down to Melania's eye level, a gesture that made him less imposing and drew a small smile from the child. "Melania, your mom is trying very hard, isn't she?" The girl nodded, glancing up at her mother with love and understanding beyond her years. Keanu stood, addressing Rebecca directly. "Sometimes life gets complicated, and we all need a little help. There's no shame in that." Turning back to Tom, Keanu continued, "And you were ready to give everything you have to help them." Tom shifted uncomfortably, unused to attention. "It's just $1.17, he said quietly, but Keanu shook his head. "No, it's much more than that. It's everything you have. That makes it priceless." The actor reached for his wallet, but this wasn't just about money. He faced a restaurant at large. his voice carrying clearly through the space. "We're all here witnessing something remarkable. This man, who is so little, was willing to give everything to help a child he's never met. If that doesn't teach us something about humanity, I don't know what does." Kyle, the teenage cashier who had been so impatient earlier, looked down at his hands, shame coloring his cheeks. Other customers shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own initial judgments and irritation. Keanu pulled out his credit card, handing it to the manager. "Everyone's meal in the restaurant is on me today," he announced. "But first, let's make sure this family has everything they need." Turning to Tom, he added, "And you're joining us, sir. Someone who shows this kind of generosity deserves more than going hungry tonight." Tom tried to protest, but Keanu's gentle insistence won out. The manager, now understanding the significance of the moment, quickly began preparing a large order for both the family and Tom. Melania's eyes lit up as food was placed before her, but she didn't start eating until she saw Tom receiving his own meal. Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. The other customers, many now crying themselves, had formed a loose circle around the scene, all previous judgment replaced by a collective understanding that they were witnessing something profound. Keanu sat with them as they ate, not as a famous actor performing a charitable act, but as someone honoring the deeper meaning of Tom's intended sacrifice. He listened as Tom quietly shared pieces of his story, his military service, the accident that started his downward spiral, the daughter he hadn't seen in years. Rebecca spoke of her struggles as a single mother, her voice growing stronger as she found understanding rather than judgment in her listeners. The restaurant had transformed from a place of ordinary transactions to a space where humanity's better nature shone through. Other customers began approaching, some offering business cards with job opportunities, others extending invitations to local shelters and support services. What had started as one man's selfless gesture had sparked a chain reaction of compassion that would extend far beyond this single afternoon. A week after the incident at McDonald's, the small restaurant had become a symbol of transformation in the community. Tom had traded a spot under the overpass for a small room at the local Veteran Support Center, arranged by a customer who worked with homeless veterans. The center staff helped him access his military benefits, which had gone unclaimed for years, and began the process of receiving proper medical care for his old injuries. Rebecca found herself sitting in an office at Memorial Hospital, speaking with the HR director who had been having lunch at McDonald's that day. The hospital had a new position opening in the administrative department, one that would offer better hours and pay than her previous job. Melania's eyes lit up when her mother told her they wouldn't have to leave their apartment after all. The hospital even offered an advance on her first paycheck to help catch up on rent. Keanu's involvement didn't end with that single afternoon. Through his foundation, he established a trust for Melania's education and worked with local organizations to create a program helping other families facing similar circumstances. But more importantly, his actions had inspired others to look beyond their initial judgments and see the humanity in those struggling around them. The restaurant manager, moved by the events he witnessed, implemented a new policy. A suspended meals program allowed customers to prepay for food that anyone in need could claim without embarrassment. The wall behind the counter now displayed dozens of tickets, each representing a meal paid forward by someone who remembered Tom's $1.17. Local news stations picked up the story, not focusing on Keanu's celebrity, but on the ripple effect of kindness that started with a homeless veteran sacrifice. Tom found himself reluctantly in front of cameras, his military bearing returning as he spoke about the importance of helping others, even when you have nothing. His words reached his estranged daughter, who recognized her father on the evening news and made contact for the first time in years. Melania's school started a kindness initiative inspired by what happened. Children began bringing extra snacks to share with classmates who might not have enough to eat. The school counselor noticed fewer students going hungry, as families in the community became more aware and supportive of each other's struggles. Melania herself became known for sharing her lunch, just as someone had once helped her. The teenage cashier, Kyle, underwent his own transformation. The shame of his initial behavior led him to volunteer at the local food bank, where he learned that passing judgment was far easier than understanding someone's story. He became known for his patience with customers who counted out change, remembering the lesson Tom had taught him about the value of dignity. Community members who witnessed the event formed a support network, meeting regularly to identify and help families in crisis. The local diner offered free breakfast to homeless veterans. The grocery store started a discount program for struggling families, and the pharmacy established a fund to help cover prescription costs for those in need. Rebecca and Melania visited Tom at the Veterans Center every weekend, bringing homemade cookies and updates about their improving life. Tom found purpose in mentoring other veterans at the center, his own experience becoming a bridge to help others find their way back from the streets. The coins he had almost given away sat in a small frame on his wall, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can spark the biggest changes. Keanu made occasional quiet visits to check on everyone, refusing publicity and instead focusing on ensuring the changes were lasting ones. He understood that true transformation wasn't about grand gestures, but about sustained support and community involvement. During one visit, he found Tom teaching Melania chess on a worn board in the center's common room, while Rebecca chatted with other veterans about their ongoing projects to help the homeless. The McDonald's restaurant became more than just another fast food place. It transformed into a community hub where people from all walks of life came together, not just to eat, but to connect and support one another. The corner where Tom used to sit now had a small plaque reading "Kindness Corner," reminding everyone that even the smallest act of generosity could spark extraordinary change. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, a group gathered in the renovated McDonald's to celebrate what they called Dignity Day. Tom, now employed as a veteran outreach coordinator, stood at the front of the room, his gray hair neatly trimmed and his posture straight with renewed pride. Melania, taller and more confident, sat between her mother and Keanu, who had flown in specially for the occasion. Rebecca, now a supervisor at the hospital, shared how that difficult day had become a turning point not just for her family, but for an entire community. The restaurant, once just another fast food stop, had transformed into a testament to human kindness. Its walls now displayed photographs documenting countless acts of generosity inspired by Tom's simple gesture. Keanu rose to speak, his presence still humble despite his fame. He talked about how one person's willingness to give everything they had, even when that everything was just $1.17, taught him more about generosity than all his years in Hollywood. The program he'd established had now helped hundreds of families across the city, creating a network of support that caught people before they fell through society's cracks. Tom's original coins remained framed on the wall, but they'd been joined by other symbols of hope. Letters from people who'd been helped, photos of families reunited, and stories of lives transformed. The restaurant's new motto, painted in elegant script above the entrance, read, "Where kindness meets dignity." It served as a daily reminder that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the capacity to care for others. Melania, now excelling in school with dreams of becoming a social worker, had written an essay about that day. Her words captured the essence of what happened. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions. My mom and I were hungry and scared, but what we found that day wasn't just food. We found a whole community of people who cared. As the celebration wound down, Tom pulled out a fresh $1.17, placing them in the restaurant's suspended meals jar. This time, he could afford to give much more, but these specific coins held special meaning. A reminder that when you give from the heart, there's no such thing as a small gesture. The simple act of counting coins had evolved into counting blessings, proving that sometimes the richest people are those who give when they have nothing left to give. Keanu watched the scene with quiet satisfaction, understanding that his fame had only amplified what was already there. The extraordinary capacity for human kindness, waiting to be awakened in ordinary moments. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the meals. It was about recognizing the dignity in every person and the power of choosing compassion, even in our hardest moments.